Andy Warhol said, "I want to be a machine, to be made of plastic," and he went to astounding lengths in his person and his art to live out this philosophy. Now Warhol's ambition shall be taken to its logical conclusion. He is about to become a robot.
And you should just tell me the words and I can just repeat them because I can't, I'm so empty today, I can't think of anything. Why don't you just tell me the words and they'll just come out of my mouth?
No, don't worry about it because
No, I think it'd be so nice.
But we'll
We'll
loosen up after a while.
Well, no, it's not that. It's just I can't, I have a cold and I can't, think of anything. And it'd be so nice if you told me a sentence.
Let me ask you some questions that you can answer.
Oh, no, but you repeat the answers, too.
Before you started the silkscreen, you made a number of paintings and you made comic strips, right?
Yes, I made comic strips. Before I did the silkscreen things.
And you made some other paintings of things that were not done mechanically. What were they?
I made, I guess they were ads in magazines.
And then you made...
and then I made...
things like...
If you have so many floors to work with,
You could do different things.
yeah, maybe there could be just some, chocolate gallery, or some things that are just.
The transformation of Andy Warhol from flesh and blood into plastic and microchip has an air of inevitability about it. It is a development which is quite natural, as far as that word applies. The notion occurred to producer Lewis Allen in 1980, and he at once took it to Warhol, as is recorded in Andy's notorious diary.
Thursday, January 3rd, 1980. Cab to Union Square and then walked to office. Lunch was for Lewis Allen, the producer. Lewis Allen was seeing me because he wants to produce a Broadway evening with me, like an evening with the Beatles, you know? One where I'd sit and read from the philosophy book. In the 60s, Lewis tried to buy the rights to Clockwork Orange for us to make into a movie. He produced Annie and things.
I used to drop down to his old factory sometimes and got him to do a poster for a show for me, which he did with great delight. And I told him what to do. He said, "Tell me what to do." And I said, "Put all the dots and fill them in." And we would do it on a big 3-sheet in Schubert Alley and have him do it for television. And I took him to the openings and things like that with Edie. Edie was still around then at that time, and later on. And I read this book of his called Andy Warhol's Exposures, which was mostly photographs of his, but also the text was hilarious. I mean, it had some of the classic Warhol statements that are maybe not so well known. And I started reading it out loud to my wife in bed, and I said, something should be able to be done with this, but there's nothing dramatic about it. It's just Andy. But it is so amusing. Here I am reading it out loud. Isn't there something? And then I thought maybe we could get a tape recorder and maybe a television screen or something, and do the text that way. Because that was Andy, was the tape recorder and the camera. And then that gradually evolved as I thought about that, as it would be totally boring just sitting there on the stage.
Tuesday, January 15th, 1980. Lewis Allen came by to talk about the musical. He wants to have puppets on stage with a recording of my voice saying things from one of the books, the philosophy book, or Popism.
And that suddenly occurred to me, why not make a robot of Andy? I had seen a robot down in Penn Station of Muhammad Ali promoting his movie. It only ran about 3 minutes in a glass case, but it was so real, people would just stand there and watch it. You kept expecting to burst out of the glass. So I really had this image of something that was totally real. And so I went to Andy, and of course, needless to say, Andy was absolutely beside himself. He said, well, my God, it can go on the television interview shows. I turned them down because I'm too shy and too nervous to do it. He can do that, and he can do commercials for me, and he can do this and that.
Warhol was soon flown out to California to be measured by the robot designers, former Disney engineers who had worked on the robotic figure of Abraham Lincoln at Disneyland. They immediately set to work photographing, videotaping, and cataloging Warhol's essential head and body movements. They asked Andy to demonstrate some of his favorite activities.
Gee, that's easy, isn't it?
Like talking on the telephone.
On the other side, you do it this way.
Could we also get some of this in profile? We need our agency to give us the widest range of possibilities.
Well, in terms of just straightening down the movement.
Even simple stretching and turning movements were recorded.
And a twist if you're looking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Remove the telephone, Chip.
Thursday, October 30th, 1980. Lewis Allen came down with the dummy makers. We had to sit around so the dummy makers could study my face and see if I'd be a good dummy.
As I understand it, the eyes become functionally parallel about 30 feet.
If a dummy moves and it makes, say, 3 mouth movements and 2 eye movements, that takes 100 motors, and every time you add another movement, you have to add like 20 more motors inside the figure.
2 and 20, 30 seconds.
While this was going on, Allen began discussing the project with then 23-year-old director Peter Sellars.
So at that point, Peter was working out of my office on another project, and we started talking, and I realized that I finally brought this up to Peter, and he launched into about an hour dissertation on what the robot of Andy Warhol was signified and how wonderful it would be. And I said, well, why don't you do it with me? And he said, absolutely, let's go.
3 centuries from now, when they want to know what our century was like. This was it. Andy nailed it.
The project's next step was the unpleasant one for Warhol of having head and hands cast in rubber.
Tuesday, December 9th, 1980. I got into the barber's chair that the dummy people brought. They did the back of my head. They put a wig hat on me. They put gook on and covered my ears and eyes. They said, pinch me if you want to get out of it. It was making me sick, and I had a cold, and I had phlegm that I couldn't cough up. It was awful. They finally took the mold off, but then they dropped it. They were saying, we can save it, but then they said they might have to do another one, and I said, no, you're not. They stuck my hands in some more gook, and that got some air bubbles, so they lost a couple of fingers on that try. Then they did my teeth, and while this was going on, Ron Reagan arrived. He just had lunch with his father at the Waldorf. I was so out of it, I couldn't really talk.
We actually took a cast of Andy's head and face and hands when he was alive, from which the robot was built. So it is exactly like him. I mean, you've seen it. It just sits there without moving, and you just expect it to move, don't you? It's absolutely, totally real.
With the mask completed, the complex engineering problems were attacked. A body was constructed and subjected to a series of demanding tests. The robot, at this early stage, was revealed to an intrigued press.
Monday, August 1st. Peter Sellars and Lou Allen came to lunch, and they've rented an apartment for the robot of me who'll star in An Evening with Andy Warhol. And all these magazines like Life and everything are supposed to do big things on it.
But then, due to the limitations of the robotics industry at that time, the project was put on hold.
That's been a long time, mainly because of technical problems of getting a robot that will not only function, but will stand up day after day, a number of shows. It takes a lot more. The old, earlier ones that really worked had to be done with little, almost toy airplane parts that didn't stand up. So this has been a real problem to get done, but we seem to have overcome that now.
Where is it now?
It's out in California, just over in the valley where the special effects people. And we're going now with the new interior mechanical technology going to make it really incredibly workable and real.
The robot's new engineer is Kevin Yeager, a Hollywood special effects man.
Peter, you've been
The
there.
same people who've done Chucky in the Child's Play series, Child's Play 1, 2, and 3, with the lip snarl, have perfected this. And it's eerie.
It's very eerie.
And I think it gets to one of the key reality versus appearance questions that is constantly at the core of Andy's thing of, is this a cheap imitation or the real thing, or is the real thing a cheap imitation? All those concentric circles. I mean, obviously, if Andy has a resurrection, it is appropriately as a machine.
It seems to me in some way it's to do with a kind of tremendous shyness and a wish to hide behind somebody or something else, which partly was also behind the whole factory way of operation. There were a whole lot of people making the work, and he was somehow behind it.
No one ever knew what was behind that facade. And you could tell that it was a facade, because Andy was very pointed about that. And he wasn't one of those people who sort of hopes the facade fools everyone, but on the contrary, never tired of pointing out the facade and making it as, vacuous as possible in a certain way. And part of the public fascination is just that there really must be something behind that. It can't just be a silkscreen of a bunch of Brillo boxes. Something has to be behind it. The surface is so alarmingly sterile and vacuous that there must be real content.
There's some fascination in robots about that too, thinking that there must be a ghost in the machine.
Right. There is a kind of wonderful history of automata, that go through every period. The French Revolution and so on. There's these fantastic automata of, certain the figures who have been executed. Were made into automata and sent in the fairground booths.
I think robots from the beginning of time have had a mythological quality. I mean, people invest in them when they see, even if they're primitive, as you say, there must be something there, and you believe it's going to come out.
And it's totemic and genuinely, some kind of sacred ritual. I mean, obviously my background is in puppetry, and all that puppets were invented to take the place of gods, to incarnate, something that nobody could speak of.
Doesn't it go back also beyond contemporary society to even a story like The Golem, which seems to me, that's something which really comes from this Central European, Russian, Ukrainian culture.
Absolutely. And Frankenstein, for that matter. I mean, and our obsession with the monster, and are we a monster of our own creation? To what extent have we created ourselves? Or to what extent are we not responsible for our actions? It's the human question. And a robot has a way of addressing that. And oddly, robotics have been in the hands of the purveyors of popular culture, who are basically showmen. And the larger meanings are there sort of inadvertently, as it were. And what's interesting is to actually bring this technology into an arena that is already charged with meaning. Because one thing that Andy was able to do was, of course, take a series of things that were ostensibly meaningless, and suddenly, in the very act of reproducing them, charge them with some kind of other significance and other aura of intention. And I think the potent quality of a robot, joined to the field of meaning that Andy's life and work has created, forms a kind of fantastic set of sparks that have to do with where are we now, what is the society actually doing, and what is, to ask the Renaissance question, what is the measure of man? Andy has set up the philosophical underpinning for the whole experiment in technology.
Do you see the robot being alone on stage in some way? Or is it
Yes, I mean, in the sense that, Andy's quintessential quality is his aloneness, even in a crowd. But at the same time, I really want him to be, as Andy is, with people. And that means the audience. You know, I want him to be on, the way Andy could be on, which means off. And then strangely, that makes it all the more you want to get closer to him, exactly because he's not coming on to you. And that odd thing of just being in the room with him.
Sellars is now focusing his attention on this unique challenge: how to make his electric performer both entertain and affect its public.
You want the audience to come right in and see Andy Warhol sitting there talking on the phone and say, oh my God, that's unbelievable. And it's not just an exhibit. It's not just a show. It's something that goes beyond both of those concepts and is this eerie, transcendent seance where Andy is reincarnated. And at the same time, this kind of People magazine level of cheap thrill, this level of you know, half Carney show, half shrine. You know, Mark was talking about making the Warhol Museum, you know, somewhere, you know, located somewhere between the Picasso Museum and Graceland. You know, people are there for all kinds of reasons and are getting all kinds of things from being there. So that you have genuine layers of meaning in the tradition of high art, but you also have a show that everyone writes home about, you know, and that is a tourist attraction. I mean, you want to have both of those things functioning because, of course, Andy always had both of those things functioning. He was operating in the cheapest tabloid level, and at the same time is one of the major figures in the history of art, and will always have one of the largest quantities of intellectual speculation surrounding his work. At the same time, anyone can see those Brillo boxes and say, whoa, wow, you stop, you look. It's bright, it's to the point, it hits you right up front. At the core of Andy's art is this urge to get outside a museum, to get outside the little bubble of the art world, to be in a shopping mall, to be in a department store window, to put art in a commercial context, in a context where it intersects the lives of most materialistic, average, everyday, walk-down-the-street Americans. If we can at least aspire to that level with this machine, if we can let this machine get out there, I think we'll have done something that actually Andy would be pleased with.
The cheekbone is am I hurting you anywhere?
You said all people are the same, and that you wanted to be a machine in your painting. Is that true?
Is it true, Bridget?